When creating navigation on your website, it's a good idea to use unordered lists or ordered lists and then use CSS to style it. Now, in this example, we're going to do a really basic navigation bar, but this can get really fancy and you can do drop-down lists and all kinds of other stuff. So let's go ahead and start with the HTML code and see how we actually would set this up. Right now we have a div with an ID of nav. Now, if you're using HTML5, this could actually be a tag called nav. And I have some filler text in here that says add navigation here. Again, this is a really simple site, really simple example. You might be at a different point in your site, whether earlier in your site before you've added other styles, or later in your site where you have everything done except for the navigation. So as long as you have a container for the navigation, then you should be okay. Now, if I go into code, I'm actually going to change this from the div ID of nav to the actual nav tag. You can use either. I'm just going to go ahead and change this to nav and change this to nav so we have our nav section. Now over here, if I go back in design view, you can see that the styles don't apply because it was only applying to the ID of nav and not the tag of nav. So if we get rid of that hashtag, then those styles will come back because then it'll apply to that nav tag. Again, you can do either or. I just like to use the HTML5 structure tags whenever I can. So I would probably go back through this structure and add those HTML structure tags if I wanted to. Again, it's not something that you would need to do. So when we get in here, we can go ahead and take this filler content out. And I usually use an unordered list. It's just a personal preference for me. You can use an ordered list as well. And then that unordered list is going to have list items that have A tags wrapped around them. And we don't necessarily know where they're going yet. And this will be whatever the page name is. So I can say page 1, close the A tag, close the LI. So you can now copy this and paste it. So let's say there are 5 pages on my website. Now, you can either do generic page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but I actually like to do something that's a little bit more specific. If I already know the pages I want to have in my site, I can definitely add their names here, but it's a good idea to kind of test out this different lengths of page names to see what it's going to look like in your nav bar. So I'll go ahead and type contact, and these are the 5 generic pages that I think I'll want to have on my site eventually. Now, I don't actually have any of those pages created, so I have a couple of options. I know my home page is always going to be index.html, so I can type that in there. Now, it probably makes sense for me to say products.html is what this page will be called, so I can go ahead and type that in there. Now, if you don't know what you're going to name your pages, you can always put a little hashtag inside of this attribute so that it still looks and functions like a link but doesn't go anywhere. So it's up to you. So I'll go ahead and do a combination of those just so that you can see it's going to work exactly the same. So this is the basics of creating an actual nav structure. Now, if I had more than one navigation situation happening on my page, whether a main navigation at the top and maybe a quick links down in the footer, then I would need to give this nav section a unique ID like main navigation, and then the one in the footer maybe a unique ID such as quick links. But because I only have one nav, then I can get away just with having the nav tag. Same thing with this unordered list. This one, if I style it a specific way and I only style the unordered list, that means that every unordered list that I have on my site, even if it doesn't have anything to do with navigation and it's just content, will be styled the same. So it's a good idea to make sure that either you're specifying that it's the unordered list in the nav section, or you give the unordered list an ID and create your rules that way. So I'm going to make sure when I create my rules that once I start adding these rules, if I hit plus, notice that it's saying the unordered list within the nav section that's within the wrapper. Normally, to keep things simple, I would take all that stuff out, but if I were to take all this out, then it would style every unordered list in my site. I don't want that to happen. So I just want it to style the unordered list that's in the nav. So I'll leave this rule exactly the way it is, and I'll go ahead and throw it down. Actually, this is a good spot right underneath the nav. And let's go into design view and see what happens. So in design view, you can see that now it's an unordered list and our links are showing up blue because that's the standard generic style for links. Now we just need to start adding some styles to make it look more like a nav bar. So for this unordered list, the only rule that we really need to do is to make sure that it's centered. It looks like it is already centered because in my nav bar, let's show the set. See how I have text align center? So I can delete that out of my nav bar and add it onto my unordered list. So let's uncheck show set, go to the text area and click center align. So I know it did the same thing, but now we know that the center alignment is happening to the unordered list and not to the nav bar itself. So now we need to style the list items within that. So I'll go ahead and click the plus sign, and notice it's saying all the A tags within the list items within the unordered lists, and this is for the whole site. So I'm going to need to change this rule. At the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and take out the A at the end, and then type wrapper nav ul li. So it's only affecting the unordered lists in the nav section. So when I have that created, what I want to do is, first thing I want to do is just add a garish background. I'm probably going to take this out later, but let's just go ahead and add this minty green background so we can see what's happening with each of these LIs. And then we're going to go to the layout section and we're going to force this to display as inline. Right now it's a block level element, so it's stacking one on top of the other. If I choose inline, they're going to sit next to each other and it's going to take away those bullets that come with our list. So this is looking much better. And as you can see with the little mint green, it's exactly the width of the text that's inside of it. So if you wanted to push those away from each other, you can go ahead and increase the margin on the left and right. So let's say I want to do 15 on the left and 15 on the right to get them to sit away from each other. Now for the UL, it looks like this unordered list, I want it to have some padding. So maybe some padding from the top of like 5 and on the bottom of 5, just to give it a little breathing room, a little bit of space. So now the last thing we need to do is we need to start styling the A tag, and there are two different selectors we're going to use for this. We're going to use the A selector. So again, we're going to have to really make this specific. So the wrapper nav ul li a, so this is all the links within the list items within the unordered lists that are in the nav section that are in the wrapper. So with this specific rule, what we're going to do is we're going to go to text decoration and we're going to say none, and that's going to take that underline off from those links. And then we're going to add a background, and it's always important to do the background first so you can see what's really affecting it. So if I turn this to a hot pink color, you can see it's exactly the same size right now as the list item. If I want it to be more, then I can go to layout and I can add some padding on the left, right, and top. So let's say I want to do 5 on the top. There, it gets a little bit bigger. 5 on the bottom. And then let's do like 20 on the left and right so they look more like big buttons. So as you can see, there's a little line in here. This isn't going to show up in live view. That just represents the LI. So the LI is still underneath there and it's still about the exact same size as the text. Now, you're always going to want to check this in live view and in your browser just to make sure things aren't being funky. It's looking pretty good to me right now. I can even check it in my browser, but if it is being funky, sometimes you just want to keep going with the rules and hopefully that fixes them. And if it doesn't fix them, then you can fix them later. But right now it's looking really good. So what we want to have happen now is we want to do a hover. This is called a pseudo selector, so that when somebody hovers over these, they change a different color. So let's go ahead and create a new rule. And again, we're going to have to make this super specific. So we're going to do hashtag wrapper nav, and then after the A, no space, colon, hover. So we're going to basically just say when somebody hovers over it, it should change to a different color. So let's change it to orange. Let's go ahead and test this out in live view. And now when it hovers over, it does change to orange. From here, it's just a matter of styling it to however you specifically want to style it. Let's say I didn't want an actual nav bar. I can make these look like buttons by going to the nav rule and taking this background color off. Now this is up to you. You can keep the bar or you can get rid of the bar, whatever you want to do. So let's say for the A tag, instead of the pink, I wanted to use this maroon that we keep using for everything. And that makes the text really hard to read, so I'll go to the text options and change my text color to white. Or I can even change it to this kind of off-white color here, just to really make it look coordinated. Then for the hover, I can go ahead and change this background color, and maybe I want to make it just black. So if we again preview this in live view, now if we hover over these, they change black. When we hover over them, the text is easy to read. Instead of looking like a nav bar, now it looks like buttons. So I could mess with the padding and the spacing to make them look like bigger buttons. I could maybe change the radius to make them look like rounded buttons. So it's just going to take some playing with the CSS to get the settings that you want. But these are the basic settings. You need a section, whether it's a div or an actual nav section. And then you need the UL list that's going to center align it and maybe have some padding and spacing, whatever you think it needs. The list items should be inline display, and you should add some margins on the left and right to give it some space away from each other. That's what this gap is here. And I don't actually want that minty green color on it, so I'm going to take that out in case anything happens with that. And then the A tag that's in the list items should have a background color, should have a font color that provides good contrast. And here's where we want to do some padding on the left, right, top, and bottom to really give the shape of the button. And then the hover, you can change the background color. And truly, you can do a lot of different things. With the hover, you can change the font color. So when I roll over, maybe it changes to orange font and black background, whatever it may be. I can even shift it down or up or down a little to make it look like it moves when it hovers over it. There's a lot of different options that you can create for this, including drop shadows, all kinds of stuff. So just play with this CSS until you get it the way you want it.